Hello everyone. Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Today's webinar is going to focus on manual pay and understanding errors. Can everyone hear me?
I can hear you, Jolene.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so just a few things. We will offer the opportunity to ask questions at the end of the section or at the end of the webinar. To do that, you can raise your hand or you can input your question within the chat. So like I said, we're going to focus on creating and processing manual pays, which includes manual pay, cancel and reissue pay, cancel and reverse pay, void and reissue pay. So basically, this means that running a special payroll or voiding and reissuing checks or ACH direct deposits for employees. Then we're going to discuss a few items on understanding payroll errors or helping users be able to work through those errors to resolve them. Then we'll have some time for question and answers, and then topics for next webinar. The pay manual checks activity is within payroll and then pay manual checks. Within pay manual checks, like I said, there's different options that the user has. The first is pay manual, which is an ad hoc pay not associated with the regular pay cycle, which really means special payrolls. You can cancel and reissue. This applies to checks only, and this is in the case where someone loses the check and you're able to verify that the employee has either turned it in or the user can put a stop payment on with the bank. Then there's a cancel and reverse. This is when a check is for the wrong amount or wrong person. So the system will void it and then give you, and then does the journal entries to back out the expenditures and the cash. Then the other option is void and reissue, and this applies to ACHs only. One thing to keep in mind is when that the pay date is not set until the payroll is submitted within the activity, and it will default to tomorrow's date. So if I were to submit any of these items up above today, the effective date will be March 3rd. There are a few items that must be handled in the setup within the payroll cycles. These payroll cycles must be added before a special payroll is ran, or if you're reissuing or canceling a check. These are all manual payroll cycles, and if they are not set up, the user will receive an error message when they try to create one of those items. Okay, so now we're going to work on creating a manual pay. So to do this, you will go to Payroll, Pay Manual Checks. It will pop up this menu. You'll enter the action of Create Manual Pay by selecting the lookup. You will enter the employee ID, and then you'll click Go. At that point, it brings you a screen just like below. You open up that record, you'll define what's in that record, you save and close, and then you'll process that payroll just like the other payrolls. So this is just a quick summary of what happens. We're going to dive in closer to what it means by defining the record. After we go through just a summary of what happens, I'll actually take you through an example within the system. So defining the record. These are the tasks that the user will complete as they go through this process. So the first step is you're going to assign the earnings, whether it's an add-on or an assignment. You open up all the tabs so that way you can see the contributions and deductions. In some cases, a user may not add them, but there is that option. Then you'll calculate pay now, so that way the system performs a calculation. At that point, the user is able to review the errors and the payroll snapshot to verify that this special payroll is correct, and then you'll save and close. So to do this, the first step, like I said, is we're going to add the add-ons or assignments. So after you open up the record, you come to the add-on tab. And in this case, I'm just going to focus on creating the add-on or assigning the add-on within the special payroll. So you click on add-ons and new. You input the information by selecting the add-on. And then based on the add-on setup, we'll determine what other fields need to be entered. So in this case, this add-on, I had to enter the units and the rate was open to change. So I changed that to 500 and it automatically fills in the rest of the fields. After you complete this, then you'll click Save and Close. Then the next task is to click on Tasks and open all tabs. Then from there, you'll define what deductions or contributions to add. In this case, I am adding deduction of ERBR and contribution of ERBR. After you add them, you click Save and Close. Then, at this point, we're going to do a calculate pay now. So you go to the tasks and select Calculate Pay Now. At this point, when you select Calculate Pay Now, the user is initiating pay for the individual, and this will allow the user to view any errors, if any, that will need to be resolved. Within the other tab, the user is able to, give me 1 second, I'm gonna hide. I guess there's a box that's appearing. I'm not sure if you all are seeing the participant list. It's not on my screen, it's on my side screen. But can someone let me know if they see it on their screen?
So Jolene, I have it on mine. You can grab the top bar on it and drag it off.
Okay. Okay, so each user may see that screen on theirs. And if they do, you can just drag it and bring it to your other screen or minimize. Okay. Thank you, John. The other option we'll go over is the other, again, I'm going to repeat myself because I lost track of what I was saying. Within the other tab, the user can override the taxes within this section here, and they can also review the payroll errors within this section here. So after those items are reviewed, the user will want to review the errors more closely to make sure that to identify if those errors can be ignored. So in this case, in New Mexico, we do have this labor error that we do ignore until the next release. And then the user will want to review the payroll snapshot by clicking on the icon here and reviewing the report. After everything is checked and is good to go, the user will click Save and Close. At this point, the system will bring in this manual pay within payroll processing, and it will be identified as a manual payroll with whatever items was included. So what that means is a user can include a cancel and reverse, it can include a cancel and reissue, as well as a manual pay all in one batch. So at this point, it's like a regular payroll where they'll submit the payroll, they'll approve the payroll, and then they'll process it. One thing to keep in mind is after, you will want to recalculate if there is some time in between when it was created and it's submitted. So you don't want that to too long. You want to process the payroll in one shot if possible. So now we're going to go ahead and look at processing a manual pay. So within my demo system, I'm going to click on HR Payroll, Payroll, and Pay Manual Checks. I'm going to select the action of Create Manual Pay and select the ID. This is scrambled data. After I select the employee, I'm going to click Go. It creates a record. At this point, I can click Open or double click. Then I'm going to add the add-on. By selecting CNM Facilitator, and based on the add-on setup, I have to enter the units, and my rate 1 amount is open to change, so I'm going to change that to $500 and click Save and Close. Click Tasks, open all tabs. At this point, the system will bring the other tabs like deductions and contributions, so I can add those. So I'll click on deductions and new. And I'm going to select ERBR, save and close. Click on Contribution tab, select New. And again, identify the contribution ID. I already knew the ID that I was wanting to select, but another option is if you click on the down arrow to view the lookup, being that I selected ERB, it's going to bring up all the codes that start with ERB. So in this case, I'm going to select R and save and close. Then I'm going to click Tasks and Calculate Pay Now. I'll wait for the system to complete the calculation. And I know this once the screen populates. And down here in the corner, it'll tell me. It'll give me a message saying when it's done. Okay, so then now I'm going to click on the other tab, look at my errors, which I know this one I'm going to ignore. Then I'm going to click on this preview item to review the payroll snapshot. I like this report because it gives me the account codes of how this payroll is going to be processed. So on the second page here, I see the exact account codes that will hit the GL, which includes any payroll liabilities. Okay, I say this is good to go. I don't have any errors. The account codes look fine. So I am ready to save and close. So I'm going to click close. And at this point, when I go to all orgs and processes and payroll processing, if I select manual pay, click go, it's going to show me that manual pay that I just created, which is this one here. And at this point, it's the same process as a regular payroll where the user will submit, approve, and process. Are there any questions?
So Jolene, I see it used tomorrow's date like you said it would. Is there a way to override that?
There is a way, but it involves a system setup that is somewhat strenuous. So I recommend using this process, although it is a possibility.
So what does that mean, Jolene? It could be processed same day if we had to?
It could. It just involves a more complicated process of setting that up. And I honestly haven't done that yet, so I don't know exactly what it looks like. This is just what I was told by Escape as well, that they also recommend this process. But if we do have a user that is interested in that, I can look further into that for them.
And I don't know if you're going to go into this, but one question I have is for this manual payroll, are we only able to issue payroll checks, or could it also be an ACH?
It is only checks, and like the activity has it identified as manual pay or pay manual check. So it's literally a check.
So there is no way to run a special payroll with an ACH?
No.
Okay, that's it.
Okay. Okay, so there's no more, one more question. So the question is, for ERB, does the amount need to be manually calculated? So right now, with that current add-on that I used, the ERB or any percentage does have to be manually inputted. I do have a call into Escape because I wasn't able to identify where in another case the add-on used did do the calculation for me. So I believe there is a way. I just wasn't able to identify the cause or the reason. So I will have a follow-up email with that information. And then one other question is, So there might be some, and I should have gone over this, but if there's some reports that the user is wanting to use, like the Pay01, after this is submitted, so if I click submit all and yes, at this point, the system will identify the pay date. So you can use a pay or generate a Pay01 report for that manual pay. And so 03, I forgot the date. Was it 0304? 0303. 0303, and then you can select the date, or you could even choose the pay schedule type of manual and click go. And then the report will include this data. But it does need to be submitted before before the system will pick it up and generate it within this Pay01 report. And as far as another question was, for the add-on or assignment, does this need to be created by the BM or ABM? And so that means business manager or assistant business manager. So each individual has certain permissions. To answer the question for schoolAbility employees, the assistant business managers do not have access to modify add-ons, so that does have to be completed by the business manager. In other orgs, it may be different. And if you're not sure who has permissions, you can reach out to schoolAbility support and we will assist you with that. Any other questions?
So Jolene, in your example, was this somebody who was not paid and should have been? Is that
Yes.
what's happened? Okay,
Yes.
so it's the beginning of March, and should they have been paid in February? And if that's the case, especially with something like ERB, would the users want to use the effective date to make it effective in February, so it gets included in the ERB reports? Is that how that would work, or?
Not for New Mexico. It's not tied to when it was earned, but rather when it was paid.
Okay.
But for California, that might be an issue or something that they need to consider.
Okay, got it.
Okay, so now let's talk about other pay manual checks options.
Did you see the question? There was a question from Dina.
Yes,
in the
and
chat.
I was going to actually, since this pertains to the topics that I'm going over now, I'll
see
that after I kind of briefly discuss that part.
Cool, thank you.
Thank you, John. Okay, so the other pay manual checks options include cancel and reissue pay, which are for checks only. So this means that the employee, lost the check and we need to reissue it. So being that there's no change to gross or net amounts, the check will be, or the transaction will be zero, and there are no journal entries that are recorded. I'm going to jump to the last one, which is void and reissue pay. So this is for ACH only. So in this case, the only time that I've seen that this was used or could be used is if the ACH that was submitted to the bank was rejected and sent back to the org that was submitted it, or if the org did not submit the direct deposit file. So sometimes the system will generate multiple files, and say, for example, the school forgot to submit one of the files. Well, that file was then not processed. So we will need to get that pay to the employee. So in this case, we'll use the void and reissue pay. So it removes the ACH or voids the ACH and then issues out a check with no change in gross and net. So it's a zero transaction and there's no journal entries. So I think that answered Dina's question. So, and so this is for the case where the bank does not process it. Then the cancel and reverse pay, this is where there's a correction. And this could be like you paid the wrong amount or you paid the wrong employee. So you need to void, so in essence, cancel and reverse that pay. So the payroll journal entries will be reversed. And then we will have to do a manual journal entry for any payroll liability checks that were processed with the payroll. The system does not credit that portion of the taxes, for example, because I think that's one of the payroll liability checks that is included. That portion, we will have to do a manual journal entry to credit those amounts. So within this process, just like when we're creating a manual pay, it's the same activity, except on the action, you'll select the applicable action item, and then you will enter the printed check number. So that could be the check or the ACH number. And then the system will automatically bring up the check amount, the name, and the employee ID. After you close that, then you'll go through the regular process of payroll processing. So I'm going to go through an example of that. So from here, I'm going to select void. Actually, I'm going to select cancel and reverse. Let me look real quick. Void and reissue, that's the one I'm going to select. Okay, and then I'm going to choose an ACH. So if I type in ACH, it'll bring up all the ACH transactions, and I'm just going to choose this one. So this is the amount. I click go. And at this point, the system should automatically bring it up within the payroll processing. So I'm going to refresh this. Oops. And that's this one here that just got created. So if you noticed, it's a zero transaction because it's just a replacement. And then you'll follow the same steps of tasks, submit all, and process, and so forth, just like a normal payroll.
So, Jolene, I also see that it's now for the 4th, not the 3rd. Is that because you had done the other one for the 3rd and it's already submitted?
Correct.
Okay.
So I did this purposely to show this. So if you have if you land up creating separate batches and you don't do it in one, the next one that will be assigned is the following date. Any other questions? So it's a pretty simple process to avoid. Okay, so now we're gonna go, so I got a request if I could reissue a check that an employee lost. So we're gonna go over cancel and reissue pay. So in this case, I do need to know the check number. So, and I didn't think about doing that to pull up a check. So I'm gonna click on reports and see if I can find a check number. And let's see if I can pull up something. And it would be just the same process as just finding what the check number is. Let's see. Probably. I think we're getting close. Okay, here we go. The 10185. So we'll come over here, click on search. So instead, I'm going to select action of cancel and reissue pay. And I'm going to enter the check of 10. Oh, I can't select that one because that cleared. So let me do 10 and see if I can pull up. Okay, we'll select this one, I think. Okay, there we go. So if you notice, the system won't allow you to cancel one that has already cleared. And you'll know that because it gave you a red X. So this one, I do have that option. So then I click, sorry, I'm gonna have to close that activity and get back in. Oops. But I need to be in the org. So I selected the org, and then now I'm selecting cancel and reissue check and 10, so that way I pull up all of the payroll checks, select the last one, and then click go. So if you notice that before that, it was grayed out. It didn't allow me to select go, so I just closed that activity and reopened it. So then now I have this one ready to be processed. So if I come back to the payroll processing and refresh my payroll processing, I now have 2. So that's how you would process or reissue a check that an employee lost. And if you notice this time, since this was not in the submitted stage, it pulled it into that batch. Any other questions? So I'm going to move on to understanding payroll errors. And I'm not going to be able to address every single one of them. This is more so users have maybe a better way or a better understanding of them and what they can do to help work through that and eventually resolve them. So some of the ways that users can view the payroll errors is within the Pay 22 report or within the Adjust Pay screen. That screen has a tab where you can review the errors at that point. There's different kinds of errors. There's labor errors and there's general errors. General errors are general in nature, meaning like if you have a flag set that employee isn't supposed to be included in the payroll, that'll be part of a general error. Labor is more with that either like an account code doesn't exist or the system is not able to process or calculate the payroll because it's related to something within the labor. And then there's also fatal errors. Fatal errors will prevent a user from processing payroll. And regardless of your filtering within the report, it will always generate within that report. And it is also listed in the payroll processing. So what that means is, I'm just going to show you a couple of items where that could be identified. So if I open up a payroll, within the screen here, it'll show you within this column if there's any fatal errors. So this one I know has one. So off the top, I know I'm going to have to fix that before I could process this payroll. And then within the Adjust Pay screen, if you open up an employee record, you can view the payroll errors within this tab as well. So for example, if you only have, when you come to the Adjust Pay screen and you're trying to process payroll and you see that an employee has 7 payroll errors, you can quickly open that record and review the tab to view those errors, or you can generate the report of Pay 22, which is this one here. Within the Pay 22, there's this error category field. So from here, you can filter whether you want to view labor errors or general errors. These two here are related to California only, so they can also filter by those types, those error category types as well. Okay, some other resources. Within the how-to, there's a section for resolving pay. I think I had a typo there. This does have, it's a hyperlink so you can click on it. But this gives you some information about the pay compute errors. And then there's a table that explains or that identifies the error message and then also gives you some ways that you can troubleshoot it. So it'll group all the general errors together, and then down below, it'll group all the labor errors. So if you come to the how-to, if you search by pay compute errors, it'll bring you to this website. So now we're going to go into a couple of common errors that I've seen as I was helping users. So this first one is a labor 9 and 54 error. And so when the system generated the report, it identifies that the contribution employer account cannot be located. So what this means is that the system does not have these account codes, so they're missing and they need to be added. This is a description from that web page that identifies the labor 9 and the labor 54. So here, there could be other reasons that are causing this error, but in this case, this was the reason. And what I mean by that is within the resolution, it's saying, or the troubleshooting column, it's saying check the employee's assignment and add-ons and verify that the charge benefits flag is set to yes. So this could be a reason as well. And I'll go over what that means on another example a little bit later. So in this case, from this type of error, where it had this description, it had missing account codes that then had to be added within the fiscal section. Once they were added, we had to reinitiate pay, so that way the system pulls that data in, and then those errors will get cleared. So keep in mind, if you do make any system changes, you will have to initiate pay again in order to regenerate and clear those errors. This next example is a labor 4. This one says that this is another example of an add-on that did not have the account code. So this was what was generated in the report. Add-ons that are not set up to be paid by a specified account. So in this case, the add-on did not specify the account code, and it needed to be included within the adjust pay. So once that account code was included, it cleared the error. And what I mean by that is the add-on setup did not specify the exact account code. So the system wasn't sure how to process or how to expense the gross wages, and therefore it'll generate this error. The next item is a labor 33. This one says that total contributions does not match the amount distributed. So in this case, we had an employee who was who was not receiving pay, but had contributions being processed within the payroll. So in this case, you may have an employee who is out on, say, FMLA and doesn't have wages, but we still need to process the employer's share, which is the contributions within the payroll. So in this case, we will add a Ben-E only add-on, which will identify the account code, and that way the system knows how to charge those benefits to the GL. Then this next labor error is 47. And in this case, this was the report that was generated. No earnings account were located for these benefits. So what happened is this employee had an add-on to pay out gross wages. It was a final pay, so it didn't have any regular pay. And that within the add-on setup, there is a field that's located in there to charge benefits that was set to no. However, this employee had these contributions that were being processed. So the system is not able to tell how to expense those contributions. So in this case, we don't want to change the add-on. However, what we can do is we can override the charge benefit field within the adjust pay. And for this situation, we wanted the system to charge benefits for that particular add-on, so that way we can process the payroll. After that field was marked to yes, it cleared the error. There are many scenarios that could cause errors. So each person or each org could have a different situation. And because there's multiple layers involved, whether the add-on is set up correctly or the accounts, if they are set up correctly, it's not an easy task to identify every single error, and then this is what you would do. I tried to identify some prime examples of them. So if you come up with an error and you're not able to resolve it, you can refer to the how-to. You can review the employee snapshot so that you can review the pay register, which will give you the account coding, and that gives you some information. So if there's an error and the account coding isn't set up correctly, it will post it to the 9999 object code. So that's the payroll errors object code. And that signifies that something isn't right and it needs to get corrected. So that's one signifier. And as I mentioned before, if there are system changes that are made, like adding account codes, the user will need to recompute pay. And at that point, it'll clear the error. After you've attempted all of these and you still cannot resolve the error, of course, you can contact customer support and we'll walk you through that process. Are there any questions? Okay, I don't see any. Okay, so this does conclude the webinar for today. And I hope that some of these topics that have been chosen are helpful. If there are other types of topics that you would like for us to present, please email that to the support team and we will get that included. The next webinar in 2 weeks, my thought is that we'll focus on finance now. So just keep that in mind, but we will be sending out the agenda probably at the end of next week. And then this webinar recording will be posted on the YouTube website along with this PowerPoint presentation, which will be emailed with the link. And I think that's it. Thank you for your time.
Sweet.
Thank you,
Jolene. Yep, everybody.
Mm-hmm.